If you haven't seen part 1 of this guide, there's a link in the description below. That video talks all about movement as Kirby, while this one will cover how to use Coo and Kine effectively. First off, I'm going to cover the basics of flying. Tapping B without touching the D-pad will cause Coo to fly upwards. If you're pressing the D-pad, Coo will fly in that direction instead. The faster you mash B, the faster you'll fly, up to a cap of 10 B presses per second. Coo tends to keep any momentum he has as long as B is being mashed quickly enough. He also retains horizontal momentum while the down button is being held, which is called gliding, but I'll touch more on that later. Essentially what you need to know about momentum is that if you're flying horizontally and you push up or down on the D-pad, Coo will start traveling diagonally, not straight vertically. The same is true if you're flying vertically and press left or right. You can even let go of the D-pad completely, although this will always cause Coo to fly upwards in addition to whatever horizontal momentum he had. You can also tap the opposite direction between B presses to turn around and fly backwards. This doesn't save any time, it just looks cool. In speedruns, you'll still want to hold left or right whenever possible, otherwise Coo will slowly lose horizontal speed over time, assuming you're not mashing B faster than the speed cap. These momentum shenanigans can cause problems if you want to start flying in a straight horizontal line mid-flight, as Coo will continue to move up or down if he has any vertical speed. In order to prevent this, simply stop pressing B for a fraction of a second, then fly in the direction you want to go. If you want to fly straight up or down, you'll need to stop mashing for a bit longer until Coo comes to a complete stop horizontally, as sideways momentum is even more persistent. The only other options are to inhale or swallow something, which also stops your momentum, or zigzag to approximate a straight line, but that isn't really worth it. If you're actually trying to move diagonally, it's pretty slow to press both directions you want to travel. Instead of holding, say, down and right, start flying to the right, then tap down only long enough for Coo to start moving diagonally. If you want to go upright instead, you can start flying to the right, then let go of the D-pad completely, since that will make Coo fly upwards as mentioned earlier. Regrab right after Coo starts ascending. You can get a steeper angle by completely letting go of left or right while you press up or down, but holding left or right the entire time gives a shallower angle. If you do want to move a bit slower, you can press 2 directions at once on purpose. This can help with tight movement and makes it much easier to get in the door after grabbing a heart star. Now let's talk about slopes and sticky flying. If you fly into a slope, Coo is going to stick to it and you won't be able to separate from it just by holding up or down. You would have to either stop mashing B to allow Coo to unstick, or fly in the complete opposite direction of the slope, so avoid touching any troublesome slopes by going up or down when Coo is touching a flat area or isn't touching anything. As long as you're mashing B, Coo will keep upward momentum the entire time he's on a ceiling, or downward momentum on floors. This means that flying into one of them won't actually cause Coo to start flying horizontally once they end. Let me first explain how to do this and how to not do it. If you're holding right but Coo is also flying up or down, Coo's going to keep all of that vertical momentum, assuming you're constantly mashing B. This means he'll follow the contour of any surface he runs into, and will continue to go up or down once past it. If you falter for too long while mashing B, Coo will have time to lose all vertical momentum and will thus stop sticking. Strangely enough, pressing down while touching a floor, or pressing up or letting go of right while touching a ceiling can also make you stop sticking for some reason, although this is inconsistent at best. You need to avoid doing either of those things if you want to stay on the surface. However, if you do want to stop sticking so that you can fly straight, stop mashing for a split second. This will let you fly straight horizontally and prevent you from getting stuck in small gaps like this. Note that this won't be necessary if you touch moving sand or snow, as those surfaces will completely nullify any vertical momentum you may have. Additionally, if Coo starts on the floor or ceiling without any vertical momentum, he won't try to follow the outline. You'd have to constantly press up or down every time the ceiling gets higher or the floor gets lower, which can also slow you down. This means that if you want to stick to either surface, you actually need to start off not touching it so that you can get the vertical momentum before coming into contact with it. One small side effect of having downwards momentum is that Kirby can jarringly clip down sets of stairs, like this. This can cause him to take damage from the Waddle Dee here in 3-2, so I'd recommend avoiding these star blocks entirely. Here's where I start going into some of the more technical and theoretical aspects of Coo's physics. If you hold only the down button, Coo will descend while keeping any horizontal momentum he had, even if B is not being pressed at all. This is referred to as gliding. If you let go of the D-pad before pressing B and then hold down immediately after, Coo will travel in a large arc before going on a diagonal path, otherwise Coo will start moving downward shortly after the down button is pressed. At this point, just holding down will allow you to keep moving at the same speed until you contact a floor, but B can also be mashed to give a steeper downward angle. Because B isn't being mashed while gliding, pressing right and letting go of down will allow you to start flying perfectly horizontally without losing any speed, although you will have to restart mashing B as soon as you stop gliding. Unfortunately, under normal circumstances, the most horizontal speed gliding gives you is less than 80% of Coo's top speed, so it's typically not worth doing. However, there is a technically humanly viable way to allow Coo to constantly fly at his speed cap without repeatedly pressing B 10 times a second, which also allows for gliding at max speed. While holding right, if you can press B twice within a 7-frame window and let go of right at least 2 frames after the first B press and no later than the second B press, Coo will enter a state where he will always have max speed as long as B is being pressed at least 5 times per second and you don't touch left or right. I'm going to call this unique state speed storage. I'll show the process frame by frame and break down the steps as I do so. Start by holding the direction you want to travel, then double tap B as quickly as you can. While doing that, release the D-pad before the second B press, but be sure to let at least 1 frame pass after the start of the first B press. Here's a general template for how the input should look. The B's are the first frame of each B button press, and the F's are the frames in between. The D-pad can be released on any of the green frames, including the first frame of the second B press. Note that it doesn't matter how many frames B is held for, as long as the next press occurs soon enough. In this example, my B presses are only 5 frames apart instead of 6, shortening the window I have to release right. I let go on this frame, so I achieved speed storage, but if I had been 2 frames later, I would have failed due to the tighter window. The hardest part of this trick is probably pressing B quickly enough, and the only way to tell if you did everything correctly is by eyeballing your speed after you let go of the D-pad. During this state, up or down can be pressed at any point as long as Coo doesn't stop flying or enter water, but pushing left or right will end the speed storage and make Coo go back to normal. If Coo has speed storage and you hold down, you'll glide at max speed without having to press B at all. However, if you let go of down, Coo will immediately lose speed storage and start to slow down, but storage can be preserved by starting to mash B before letting go of down, as long as it's being mashed at the required speed of 5 times per second. Although gliding relies on speed storage to be fast, gliding casually can help trigger a momentum glitch that has to do with entering water while flying. Normally water would massively reduce Coo's speed, but if left and right are not being held, pressing B at just the right time when entering the water will allow him to preserve all of his speed into the water until left or right is pressed, B stops being mashed, or Kirby touches the ground. Unfortunately, the visual cue for pressing B is inconsistent due to Coo's animation. All of these are the frame that B should be pressed, but some are directly before Kirby appears fully submerged, and some are directly after. Keeping 100% of your speed requires a frame-perfect B press, but pressing it late can still allow Coo to keep some speed. He'll just be slowing down every frame until you press it. While it's certainly possible to hold down, mash B, and just pray that you press B on a frame that keeps most of your speed, the more elegant solution is to start gliding so that you can time your B press. If you get some rightward speed and then hold only down, you can try to start mashing B on the exact right frame, with pressing it late being better than early. Additionally, if you manage to set up a glide with speed storage, you can potentially have Coo flying at task speeds while under the surface of the water. This trick is only helpful in a couple places during the run, so it's certainly not necessary to learn, but it can be a really cool way to save a few seconds if you can pull it off. I'll also go over some quirks Coo has that you can use to your advantage. Unlike his Kirby, you're going to slow down whenever you inhale an enemy, whether they're in the air or on the ground. To minimize the time lost, you'll want to minimize the time spent inhaling, meaning you should wait until you're as close as possible to an enemy before pressing Y. If done well, you'll barely even slow down. This can be risky though, since if you wait too long, you'll obviously run into the enemy and take damage. Once you have an enemy in your mouth, Coo will usually stop for a brief second if you exhale it. This can also be mitigated if you press Y immediately after a B press. Coo will get enough forward momentum to carry him through the exhale animation, and you'll be able to keep flying without much delay. As I mentioned in part 1, if you have an enemy in your mouth, you should spit it out manually before entering a door. However, if there's an enemy directly blocking the door, there's a trick you can do to avoid inhaling it in the first place. If you're holding right and you press Y immediately after B, Kirby will move to the right some while inhaling. If there's an enemy in front of you, it will also be moved to the right. Positioning yourself correctly will allow you to move the enemy some while you slide in front of the door, which will allow you to enter it by pressing up even though you're in the middle of an animation. Because Coo will slowly float downwards if no buttons are being pressed, you'll need to push left or right if you want to maintain a specific altitude. You can also inhale if you're currently powerless. Unsurprisingly, holding down will allow you to descend faster, and simultaneously mashing B is faster than that. However, unless you have Stone, the fastest way to fall is by leaving Coo completely. If there's a long vertical room you need to get to the bottom of and you won't need Coo after it, leave him behind. If you do need to keep Coo, you can also have Gooey hold him temporarily. Another reason to dismount Coo is if you want to break star blocks above you. Most powers with Coo can't break blocks directly overhead, so you'll need to separate from him so that Kirby can headbutt them. You can also use Gooey to save time here, as trading an animal friend between players will skip the join up animation that you'll get if you leave Coo completely before reuniting with him. Once you want to get rid of Gooey, keep in mind that Coo's hitbox works in such a way that you need to be facing left to inhale Gooey if you're both at the same X position. Another thing about Coo's hitbox is that the entirety of it needs to be above a semi-solid to go down through it, not just Kirby. It can really look like you should be able to go through, but if even 1 pixel of Coo's hitbox is on solid ground, it's not gonna work. This also means it can be somewhat difficult to go through semi-solids that are only 2 tiles wide with Coo. Also, even though Coo's hitbox is 2 tiles wide, he can somehow fit in between the Gordos and 4-5 as long as you fly straight up. One last thing to note is that mashing B faster than 8 times a second will allow Coo to have enough speed to fight against water currents, which can be useful when running best ending. Speaking of water, let's talk about Kine. Kine has the same hitbox quirk where he can only inhale Gooey while facing left if Gooey is right on top of him. On land, Kine can only jump once, but it's by far the highest jump of any animal friend, and he can also bounce off of most enemies just like Rick and Nago can. Something to be aware of is that tapping the D-pad twice super quickly will not cause Kine to start running, which can be annoying when trying to do an auto-scroller skip, which I won't be covering here. He also loses running speed when hitting a wall, as all animal friends do. Swimming with Kine is similar to flying with Coo, but much less complicated. Mashing B makes you go faster with the same speed cap of 10 presses per second. Pressing B without touching a directional button will cause Kine to swim upwards, but he doesn't keep that upwards momentum the way Coo does. He does keep momentum when falling into water, though. When first entering water, you may want to hesitate before starting to mash B so that you don't swim down into enemies. Alternatively, you can tap up or down after entering the water to reset your momentum. When swimming diagonally, you can just hold both directions on the D-pad, as there isn't really another option. Inhaling enemies underwater is basically the same as with Coo. You want to get as close to them as possible before pressing Y. Once they're in your mouth, keep in mind that projectiles travel very slowly underwater, so if you try to spit them at another enemy, you'll need to wait a second or you'll just run face first into the enemy yourself before it dies. In this game, holding jump will always allow you to get a full jump out of water. You don't need to time the B press. Once you get close to the point where you want to jump out, stop mashing B and just hold it, also starting to hold up either right before that B press or right after it, whichever works better for you in that situation. While jumping, you can keep full running speed as long as you were running before you entered the water and didn't press Y or take damage while in the water. This actually applies to most animal friends, although it's only really relevant for Kine. Kirby can also keep running speed through water if he inhales while entering the water, which could potentially be helpful if you die near the end of a level. Now that I've covered all of the movement tech, the rest of the video will explain how specific abilities work, starting with if you have Coo. I'll start with Coo and Burning, since that's probably the most prevalent combination in the run. You can cancel your attack by pressing Y during it, but you'll want to use Burning as little as possible since it's slower than flying. The camera doesn't stay ahead of you while using Burning, so if it's used too much it can become difficult to see, which can't be helped in some places. If you really want to be able to see, you can fly without pressing B for a second, which will give the camera time to swing ahead of you, but this obviously wastes some time. Burning will end almost instantly in water, but if you start using it above the water, you'll get the full duration even after going under the surface. Moving on to Stone Coo, using it will instantly stop all of your horizontal momentum, unlike with just Kirby. You'll also accelerate downward super quickly and fall much faster than you normally could, making it ideal for vertical rooms. If you exit Stone midair, you won't carry any vertical momentum, so you can start flying in a straight line without pause. Enemies will be destroyed if you touch them while moving, but you can neither deal nor take damage if you're sitting still. You'll also create small dust clouds when hitting the ground that can destroy enemies. You won't create these clouds if you're already touching the ground, however. Normally, simply moving will keep you high enough off the ground to always trigger this attack when you use stone, but if you're flying into a slope when you use it, the dust clouds won't appear. You will slide a bit in this case though, so you can use that momentum to take out the enemy with your body. Once you're in stone form, you can fly around slowly by holding B and moving left or right. Kirby can destroy enemies and damage bosses like this, but Coo is vulnerable to damage whenever he's moving. When using Clean, you can hold the attack as long as you want by holding Y, but there's a minimum amount of time you will be locked into that attack, even if you only tap Y. To get around this, you can start cleaning early and then let go when you want to move, ending the attack pretty much instantly. You keep some momentum when initially using Clean, so you'll slide a bit if you have any significant speed when you use it, which you have to take into account when timing your attack. Because using Clean essentially removes Coo temporarily, you'll fall when using it, which is faster than trying to fly downwards. You can hold down and press B just before using Clean to hit terminal velocity even faster. If you don't want to start falling immediately, you can let go of the D-pad and tap B just before pressing Y to get a burst of upwards momentum when you start the attack. A couple tips for less prevalent abilities: you can hold up or down to change the angle of cutter, and dropping ice will destroy any enemies you froze, so be sure not to discard it until your chilled foes have finished clearing the path. Moving on to Kine's important abilities, Spark allows you to move while using it, which is what enables you to skip some auto-scrollers with it. The light bulb will stay out for as long as you hold Y, and it will still be able to destroy blocks and enemies once it's broken. Using stone in water will lock your horizontal speed until you hit a floor, so using it immediately after pressing B can allow you to coast at maximum speed for a bit, while also being invincible the entire time. In water, the projectile from burning travels at about the same speed as spitting out a star, so you'll have to wait for it to pass you if you're trying to hit an enemy with it. Keep in mind that dropping burning or Kine will cause this projectile to disappear, so wait until the attack has done what it needs to do. Thanks for watching the second and final part of my Dreamland 3 movement guide. As mentioned at the start of the video, there's a link to part 1 in the description if you want more details about movement tech as Kirby. You can also join the Kirby Speedrunning Discord if you want to ask questions or talk about Kirby runs.